Okay, we're a minute away from starting today's language workout, and I look forward to interacting with you. We'll wait a minute here until it's actually 10 o'clock. Unfortunately, there's some kind of a vehicle outside pumping or whatever they're doing, spraying, and it's giving us a little bit of noise. We'll wait another 30 seconds or so. And then we will get started. And I'll talk a little bit at first about my day yesterday, and I'd be interested to hear from others in your comments about how the 90-day challenge is going and what you are doing. I wish they would leave out there. It's kind of noisy. Let's see now. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. Welcome to the second of our language workouts. And what I'm going to do is sort of go over my day, because after all, I'm on a 90-day challenge. That means I'm doing something every day. As I said earlier, there's a bit of a noise outside. There's nothing I can do about it. Talk about what I did yesterday. And today I want to focus in on, selecting the right content. And I'm going to show you some of the things that I do. Today I'm going to reference my Arabic. Friday, I will be talking about some of the same things insofar as Farsi is concerned. Again, remember that I'm going to spend basically one half of the week on Arabic and one half of the week on Farsi, which is not ideal. It's not ideal because A, I have less time to spend on the one language, and B, as I'm looking for words, sometimes if I'm trying to speak Arabic, Farsi pops into my head. So it's not ideal. It does have the advantage that it provides me with some refreshment, it changes the language that I'm learning. Anyway, so yesterday, first of all, on Monday, we had the first workout, and I followed that up with a conversation in Arabic with my tutor, Dalia, who's an excellent tutor. And I have to admit that I really struggled, which was a little discouraging. I felt that I spoke worse than I had on previous occasions. Certainly worse than when I was in Morocco. And so there are a couple of reasons for that. It could be interference from Farsi. I think it could also be because I had my first workout and I had some glitches in using the system, and I was a little bit kind of, tense, I guess. And language learning is not different from many other activities. If you are somehow tense, you're going to do less well. And the other thing, of course, I guess two other things. One, we don't improve in a straight line. We do well some days, we do less well other days. And probably our subjective evaluation is not really that accurate. Other people don't notice these differences, but we feel them. So anyway, that happened on Monday. So Tuesday, I spoke to Dalia again, and I did much better. And Dalia sent me my report from my discussion, as well as a recording. And so I'm able to review those, and I'll get into that in the body of the discussion today when I talk about, a strategy for content. How do you choose the right content? But the other conclusion I took from my, call it failure to do well in my discussion on Monday is that maybe I've got to move away. I've spent so much time on these mini stories, 50 times per lesson stuff. I'm tired of them, and this is going to happen. And I've done this before. I've moved away from them. When I go back to them, they're now new, they're fresh, and I discover new things. So you can't keep on, mining the same mine. You have to go out there and find some new stuff. So let me show you on, and the other thing I'm going to show you too is, I tried to use LingQ, and I encountered some difficulty in saving phrases, and it was because I was not using it properly. And I will show you now how you're supposed to do that. So without further ado, let's share my screen. Now, hopefully everyone can now see my screen. As I come into LingQ every day, of course, there's all kinds of content here, potentially attractive content that I could go for. Basically, it's either what other people have studied or completed, or some of the news sites that we scrape, as it's called, where we bring items in, typically without audio. However, many of these, like this Al Jazeera, I would love to do this, but I just find it too difficult. So I'm in that spot. I'm sure many of you have been there, where the easy stuff is easy, but it's getting boring, and the difficult stuff is too difficult. So yesterday I said, okay, the well has run dry insofar as the mini stories in Arabic are concerned. I'm going to attempt some of this difficult stuff. And if you look at my my lessons here, so I have a number of sort of France 24, Al Jazeera. I got difficult stuff there that I can go after, and I went after it, and it was again too difficult. I've been there before. Yeah, I've saved a bunch of links there, but it's just. And the other thing in Arabic is it's not like I'm learning Polish after Russian, where so many words are kind of more or less identifiable. It's like every word is on its own, and I can't remember them. And so I said, forget it. So then I remembered that I had, just like much of this content, France 24, Emile. I bought the Emile book and with the audio, and I paid someone to transcribe it, and I imported that into LingQ. I did the same for another book called Manuel de l'Arabe Moderne, which I also brought in. So I have these two. I also have Harap's somewhere, but I'm not going to go looking for it. So I have these language books that I bought, and which I paid someone to transcribe, which I can't remember what it cost me, but compared to, I don't know, 10 lessons in the language, it's cheaper, and I get sort of so much use out of it. I can't share these. I contact the publisher. I say, can we share these? I had quite a discussion with Emile, and in the end, they have not agreed. We want to sell their content across our site, integrated with LingQ. They don't agree. I don't know. At any rate, we haven't been successful. But I do this for my own use. So I decided I'm going to spend more time with these contents that I looked at before. And so I started listening, for example, to Emile and Arabe Moderne. And like Emile, just while making breakfast and then cleaning up, I was listening to the lessons at the very end of the book, and I just noticed that I was understanding so much more than I understood before. So I think I'm going to go in and finish Emile, finish Arabe Moderne, even though it's not tremendously fascinating. It's just further exposure to the language. And let me just show you, if let's say we open Emile here, and then I'll get back to the question of my tutors. So I've got all these lessons here. It's, but the one I was listening to just now, let's see, les achats. Okay. So we open this. And so this is, and we'll look at the full text. So this is a lesson that I went through a long time ago. And then I found it too difficult, and I haven't been back since. But now I'm starting in again. So now one of the things I wanted to show you is that I had not understood properly how the...
كم لهذا القميص.
Okay, so if we save a phrase...
كم لهذا القميص.
And then I move away from
يساوي.
it, that will stay highlighted. But the problem occurs when we save
نفس القميص.
One phrase
نفس القميص.
and then save another phrase.
هل عندكم نفس القميص. هل عندكم نفس القميص.
Now I have two phrases inside the same phrase. When that happens and I move somewhere else, the phrase is no longer highlighted. And this was something that I didn't realize how it worked. And I said, geez, it's not working. The phrases aren't highlighting, because I mostly work on my iPad where it works slightly differently. So I spoke to our developer, and he explained what you have to do is you go into the phrase then expands. Now you'll see that as I slide in here, the box around these two phrases is larger. So then if I click in that empty
نفس
space, sorry, that didn't work. Yeah, if I click in there, I will see the two overlapping phrases. So then I can choose which of these two phrases I want to look at.
هل عنبكم نفس القميص؟
So that's the reason why when you move away from it, it's still white. When you go there, you find a spot to click on and you see the two phrases. So I don't know if this is the best way to deal with this, but that's how it works. And it is important to save phrases. Like I have not gone through this. I listened to it while doing breakfast. I haven't gone through it. I will go through it and I will pick those yellow words. Yusawi. Interesting, because this came up in my tutor's report as well. So kam yusawi hadha al-kamis. Like, what does the shirt come to, is what it says.
كم يساوي هذا القميص؟ كم يساوي هذا القميص؟
So if I go through this text and then save words and then go in and save phrases, then I've got some real good material to work on when I go to do my review. And I can even do things like dictation, where I'm forced to write it. Now, the dilemma we have as language learners is whatever effort we put into intensively trying to learn something by doing the review, by doing the dictation, of course, that's time taken away from growing in the language by more extensive reading and listening. So you're always sort of torn between, and I talked about this before, the short term, the long term. So I didn't do well in my conversation with my tutor. Obviously, if I spent more time intensively working on expressions and phrases, I will do well. I will do better in my conversation, probably. But I will not be progressing as quickly towards being able to understand the more difficult material, the France 24 interview that I want to understand. So these are choices. We choose the content we want to listen to. We choose simple versus difficult. We choose intensively working something versus extensively expanding. And, that's just what you got to do. So, again, I'd be interested in hearing your comments on how you deal with this issue of intensive versus extensive, easy content versus difficult content, really mining the content for words and phrases versus expanding the language, getting used to the flow of the language, getting into more interesting content. One last thing I wanted to mention here before we, I'm open to questions, but one other thing that I think is very important is, when I talk to my tutors at LingQ, I save all of the conversation reports, and now I'm making sure that they give me a recording of the conversation report. So I collect all my conversation reports, and here you can see that I had and it's also a record, like I had my first conversation in Arabic on the 8th of August. Okay, and so you can see all the different people I've spoken to leading up to the most recent one with Dalia. And I'm going to open up the report that I received from Dalia. Now,
زوجتي.
Unfortunately, and this is very important, she used bullets instead of periods, and therefore the phrases that she created for me don't separate. So I've asked her to do that. And of course, the relationship with the tutor, it's an evolving situation. She at first gave me a lot of words, and then she said, I think it's better to give you complete sentences and complete phrases. I said, that's good. So she did that yesterday, late last night. But because she didn't put in periods, it all comes as one big text, which is okay. I can still work it, but I've gone back and asked her to put in periods so that they will be separate sentences. And if they're separate sentences, then I can even, like, without separate sentences, sentence view obviously doesn't work. Sentence view looks the same as full text. So it's important to put in periods in the tutor report. And she gave me a very good...
لدينا حياة بسيطة. أحضر الإفطار كل يوم.
So, and I listened to this 3 or 4 times this morning while making breakfast, went over the text again, And it's a great way to relive the conversation. It's still alive in my mind. And the great thing about conversation reports is you can steer the content. So if you want to develop vocabulary on a certain subject, then you talk about that subject and that vocabulary is going to come up. And then, of course, it comes back to you in the report, both written and with the audio. So it's another form of content. So it creates, so we've got the easy content that someone else created. We've got the difficult content that might be intrinsically more interesting. And then you have this content that in effect you create with your tutor and it stays with you and you can go back to it whenever you want. I think that's basically it. What I intend to do now, I've been through this. Okay, so what am I going to do today? I've been through this several times. I'm not going to go through it again. What I would want to do now, if I were going to sit and study right now, which I probably should, since this is what I'm supposed to be doing, if I would want to go into, I was just listening to Emile, I would like to go into the, maybe I would go in, like these first ones are probably too easy, but maybe starting around 50, and I would go from 50 to 76, which is the last lessons in Emile, and really work through them, saving words and phrases.
الصابرين.
And that then prepares me
مستعجلة.
to listen to them. And then I can listen to them all when I'm working out in the gym. And that would be my day. So maybe I'd like to leave a little more time now for questions. Any comments or questions you have on how you want these sessions to proceed, questions you have about language learning, please let me know. I don't know if there are any at this point. Maybe not. Okay. If there are none, then I'm going to start studying here.
امرأة مستعجلة. امرأة مستعجلة. مستعجلة. انتظرت يا سمينة دورها. دورها. يا سمينة. انتظرت.
Okay, a question on learning Chinese characters. Maybe I should almost do a demonstration of this. I can only tell you what I did when I learned Chinese characters 50 years ago. There are other methods available today that didn't exist 50 years ago. But 50 years ago, I had a box of cardboard characters. And very, very beautifully drawn in calligraphy. And I would take 10 to start with, and I pull up one, and I have this, squared paper with both vertical and horizontal lines. So it's full of squares, which means that there are columns. So then I pick up the first character, and I write the character down the left-hand column. And, I write it 10, 15 times. I found in those days that I had to, first of all, I was required to write in Chinese. So there was no option of not writing. Like today, I don't learn to write. I'm not going to write Arabic by hand. I don't even write, Russian by hand. I'm learning for fun. But in those days, I was paid by the Canadian government to learn Chinese. I had to be able to write. In our final exam, we had to translate newspaper editorials from English to Chinese. I had to write diplomatic notes in Chinese. I had to be able to write. So there's no question there. I just had to write. So I would write one character 10, 15 times down the left-hand column, and then put the character face down. And then I would write either the sound, the pronunciation of that character, or the meaning in English 3 columns over. Then I would pick another character, and I would write it down 10 or 15 times, and then also put the meaning or translation a few columns over. And I would keep doing that. And by the time I picked up the third character or the third card, I would run into the first one, you know, the English or the sound of that character. And then I would have to write it again another 5-6 times. So it was like long before anyone, or before I had heard of spaced repetition, it was my own primitive spaced repetition system. And I started out with 10 a day, and I got it up to 30 a day, every day, just about. But the thing to remember is that 10 a day or 30 a day, you're going to forget most of them. So I had to constantly reshuffle ones that presumably or ostensibly I had learned back into the deck, because you're constantly forgetting. And I did that for the first 1,000, and thereafter, just through a lot of reading, and I was a massive reader of Chinese, more than any of the other students studying with me. I had already, you know, figured out that listening and reading were the keys to learning the language. And so then when I came across new characters, I would write them out somewhere, but it wasn't a systematic sort of, this sort of primitive spaced repetition system. It was just a matter of getting used to writing them. And then we had assignments where we had to write. So I was exposed to the characters through reading and writing. And basically in the first 9-10 months, I learned, I don't know, 3,000-4,000 characters. I read my first novel in Chinese after 7 months. Lots of characters I didn't know, but it worked. So that was one question. Okay, do I find French or German to be harder to learn? Impossible for me to say, because I had French at school. I lived in France for 3 years as a university student, did all my, you know, studying and writing essays and everything in French. So French was, for me, it was just, yeah, I went at it very methodically. German, I learned, I would say German, I never struggled with grammar in French because I had so much exposure to the language. Whereas in German, I had to make the decision to not try to memorize the declension tables, or I would never get anywhere. And once I took the decision that I am going to make mistakes in German, but I want to get exposure to the language, I get a flow, a rhythm of the language, my German improved. I make more mistakes in German than in French. Intrinsically, which one is more difficult? I can't say if you're starting from scratch. Then a question here, how do you keep up with all the languages that you know? Okay, there is no, if I decided to sort of really improve in even French or Japanese or Chinese or Spanish, which are some of the languages that I speak, you know, better, I could do a really good job on them. So once you've got this many languages, of course you can't maintain them all at the same level. However, what I find is that if I learn the language through massive listening and reading, if my brain has been exposed to so much of the content, so much of the language, then I am rusty when I start into it. But I very quickly get back to where I was and then get better. So I don't worry about keeping up with all these languages. I can't possibly read in 20 languages every day, or maybe I could, but I don't, because there's only so much time in the day, and I'm, as it is, devoting my time to 2 languages, which is not ideal. So I don't worry about maintaining them. I think that, and if I do need to brush up, let's say, you know, as has happened, I'm invited to come on television in Vancouver and speak in Mandarin, then I'll spend a couple of hours listening to some of my Mandarin CDs or reading in Chinese, and I have done the same for Italian or Spanish. Listening and reading, again, kind of seems to refresh the neurons that you need for that language. Which is your favorite language is a question here. I don't have a favorite language. I am typically obsessed with the language that I'm trying to learn. And in this case, Arabic and Farsi. And I just find them fascinating for themselves and also for what they conjure up. Arabic, there's the pre-Islam Arab and poetry and things of that nature. There, I was in Petra, Jordan, which is this amazing site with the community of Arabs pre-Islam who carved these wonderful, call them sculptures, architecture out of the sand. You've got the whole Andalusia. There's so much in Arab culture and that I know nothing about. And similarly in Farsi, Persia has been a major force in world history. So the opportunity to engage with those languages, I find that totally fascinating. But I feel just as excited when I'm doing Greek or Russian so I don't have a favorite language. I just like engaging with languages, whatever they may be. Okay, so I'll just continue studying here because that was the idea. And if there are questions, I will answer them. So.
انتظرت يا سمينة دورها. انتظرت يا سمينة دورها. انتظرت.
Notice I'm changing the hint here.
طويلة. مدة طويلة. مدة طويلة.
Now I know مدة طويلة, but it's such a useful phrase that I've decided I'm going to review it again.
أخيرا. الشباك. وأرسلت. طرد. أرادت.
Now I like to listen to the text-to-speech in Arabic because I'm not always so confident of my ability to read Arabic.
مسجلة. رسالة مسجلة. رسالة مسجلة.
And I'll sometimes correct the hints if I think that's a more appropriate translation.
شباك.
So it's a window.
وجدت. نفسها مرة. نفسها مرة.
How long realistically does it take to learn your first language? I've been learning Italian for that, and I'm still really struggling. Okay, how long does it take? First of all, when you say struggling, it depends on what your expectations are. We struggle for a long, long time. And I think it's very important to feel a sense of achievement for what we are able to do rather than worrying about what we cannot do. It's first of all, it's realistic. Second of all, it keeps us going. I think whenever we have a sense of achievement, we are encouraged, we feel good about ourselves, we're inclined to want to continue. 7 months struggling. Okay, I've been learning Arabic for more than a year off and on. I have, according to my statistics, 7,000 known words in Arabic. And I bet you I struggle more in Arabic than you struggle in Italian. This is a question from Nicholas Jones. Yeah, I mean, if you knew Spanish, you would learn Italian more quickly because you'd have so much of the vocabulary and the grammar. I think there is no, it depends what languages we know. It depends what our activities are. It depends what you mean by struggling. Are you struggling to read the newspaper? Are you struggling to speak? At some point, when we have accumulated, personally, by the way, I don't think 4,500 known words is a lot. I think that in my experience, like even with Czech, which I studied for 8 months, and I already had Russian, I struggled for quite a while in speaking. And I think when you get to 15,000 known words, you won't be struggling as much. In other words, we need a lot of words, because the known words is not only an indication of what you know, it's also an indication of how much of the language you have exposed yourself to. And so it's kind of a milestone. And then at some point, and I mean, you can start at the typically to me, 5,000 words is a good place at which to start speaking. But when you get to 10 to 15,000 words, you now have enough that you can understand what people are saying, a lot of it. And then you have to start speaking a lot, because eventually to speak well, you have to speak a lot. But 7 months, 4,500 known words, struggling, to me, that's absolutely normal. And I wouldn't get down on myself, Nicholas. Here's another question from Tom. In your sessions with your tutor, do you focus on modern standard Arabic, or do you discuss dialects? So, of course, the problem in Arabic is that there are no native speakers of modern standard Arabic. So if your tutor is from, like my tutor is of I think, Jordanian or Palestinian background. I've had tutors of Egyptian background. I presume their version of modern standard Arabic is influenced by their local dialect, the local language actually. But we only talk in modern standard Arabic. And I have made that decision based on the fact that I don't know if I'm going to be interacting with people from Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. So if I learn the modern standard Arabic, I can access whatever's on the internet. I can access, podcasts, newspaper articles, books. And at some point, if I know that I'm going to be needing a particular form of Arabic, then I will have a good base from which to learn that form of Arabic. It may be that I decide to go for Egyptian Arabic simply because there are so many movies available in Egyptian Arabic, but it depends what my motivation is going to be. So that's that. We're now kind of at the end. I'm going to go back to studying my Emile text here. If there are no further questions, then I appreciate any comments you have on how we can make these sessions more interactive would be appreciated. I hope you find them useful. And so now I'm going to shut it down.